Yud Aleph Nisan is a day that the Rebbe says is the birth of Atzmos, of essence, as essence is revealed in this world. So it is a very, very, very intense day, and it's nice to do something holy. So thank you for the class. We are in the final chapter of Tanya, of Likutei Amarim, the first section, chapter 53. We began it last week, briefly overview and continue. We said that we spent chapter 52 understanding how creation happened, what was level 2 in the 3 levels when we compared it to ourselves. The first level was complete intensity and non-readability by creation, both in ourselves and in all of creation. And in level 2, in ourselves, the godliness of soul constricted enough to get into our brain, and now our brain can absorb that. And then it constricted much further and is expressed in the entire body, in each aspect of the body, as it can absorb Hashem, God's energy through the soul. That was pretty simple in ourselves and much more complicated in creation. Where in creation we said, yes, just parallel to level 2, God's infinite energy constricts to come within the, so to speak, brain energy of God, the will and wisdoms in the highest of the 4 spiritual worlds, the world of Atzilus, the world of being. And there it's readable to the energy of the intellect, the will and wisdom of God. But that's as far as it goes. It's not readable to anything else in creation. So creation can't happen from that, because creation can't read and absorb and get affected and be energized and be created. We said, okay, now we have to have another extension from the infinity of God, far more constricted, that goes into the lowest level in the highest world, sovereignty, malchus of the world of Atzilus, the world of being. And from this energy, this is already like a degree of revelation, outward bound, Shekhinah, creation, God's speech. God creates through speech. Now creation can happen. But we said, no, it still can't happen. Because it's like the sun, by the sun, the rays don't exist. By the power of creation, the infinity of God, as it's engarbed and invested in Malchus of Atzilus, sovereignty in the world of being, too powerful. The rays can't happen because you're right by the sun. Creation can't happen because you're right here by the energy of the infinity of God as it is in Malchus of Atzilus. Nothing happening. We need a filter. What could be a filter? Anything weaker will burn up. Anything higher will just create more energy that creation can't handle. Perfect filter, the infinity of God, as it is in the will and wisdom, as that is engarbed in Torah. Much higher than sovereignty of the world of being, Malchus of Atzilus, so it will not get burnt up by the energy of sovereignty of the world of being, Malchus of Atzilus. So it's much higher, it's not going to get burnt up, but how will creation happen? We just create more energy. We said no, because Torah descends to every level of creation, and each level is able to be read by that level of creation. It descends and manages to constrict itself on each level to be as per that level's receptivity. That's the Torah on that level. There's a Torah on the world of Atzilus, and then there's a Torah on the world of Bria, and there's a Torah on the world of Yitzir, and there's a Torah of the world of Asiya, and there's a Torah, of course, in our physical reality. It's the same Torah, of course. It's not more than one Torah. But that Torah on each level is as per the receptivity of that world. So Torah has this ability to match the limitations of the world. So therefore, Torah is the perfect filter. It's stronger than the infinity of God as is in Malchus of Atzilus, so it's not going to get consumed by that. And at the same time, it relates to creation on each level, so therefore creation can happen. And with that, we explained with a lot more detail than I'm saying, creation on the worlds of Atzilus, and Bria, and Yitzir, and Asiya. And in this chapter, we're talking about the physical reality of Atzilus, the physical reality of Asiya. And we said, well, also here, just like there's the Holy of Holies in all of the 4 spiritual worlds, there was a Holy of Holies here because there was a temple. There was a first temple, which stood for 410 years. There was a second temple, which stood for 420 years. And in that temple, in both temples, there's a Holy of Holies, a physical room, so to speak, a space called the Holy of Holies. And in that physical space was God's energy, not just like in all the 4 spiritual worlds, far, far, far greater. The Holy of Holies and our physical reality in a physical place, in Jerusalem and Mount Moriah, in that physical structure, that energy was greater than the Holy of Holies in the world of Atzilus. Never mind Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. How could this be? We said because in the Holy of Holies were the tablets, were the 10 Commandments. And they contain the entirety of God's wisdom beyond any of the four worlds. Why would it be beyond any of the four worlds? Because as we've been coming back to again and again in the last chapter, Torah is higher than creation. Right now, we, me, you, our brains are in Torah. Our brains are higher than creation. Creation doesn't exist for us. Creation is way lower than anything we're doing right now. Because Torah is the filter of creation. Torah is beyond creation. Torah is the source of creation. So the entirety of Torah is the Ten Commandments, is the two lochos, the tablets. And they are in the Holy of Holies, in that physical room, in that physical structure, on that physical mountain, that physical city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. So therefore, the energy there was essence of God himself, beyond anything on any of the four spiritual worlds. And we said, therefore, there was a difference in the world. We had a level of Torah beyond any level in spiritual worlds. And we said it got into our physical world, skipping the two worlds. We have Atzilus and Bria, which it went through, skipped Yitzir and Asiya, not to be even minimized on any level, and go straight into the Holy of Holies, that physical room in our physical planet Earth. And we said, therefore, in this world, there was the essence and being of God through the tablets, through the luchos, through the Ten Commandments. In our world, in that Kodesh Kodashim, with such a level of God's energy, we said it's called Nimna HaNimnos, a synergy, a fusion of limitation and limitlessness. One, well, that makes no sense. Yeah, but God is bigger than that. Takes up space and doesn't take up space. One, there was a level of grasping God. There's two terms we use to understanding God. We have Hasagas HaMahus, grasping the essence. We have Yedias HaMetzias, an awareness, a knowledge of the facts, of the realities, of what it is. Meaning, you could be able to give someone else over all the steps one needs to take to bake a chocolate cake or challah, but you can personally not be able to do it yourself. You have Yedias HaMetzias, you know the facts, but you don't have Hasagas HaMahus, you don't know how to do it. You don't grasp it. So obviously I'm giving a almost laughable example, but there are things in our world, just each person within their own self-imposed or real limitations. I could say it, but I don't get it at all. Now, let's say we're talking about God. So in our world, generally, we can perhaps, with a lot of learning, grasp the facts, know the realities as much as a human is privy to know the facts about God. But we don't understand that in essence and depth. We know what we can say. We can say there are four worlds. You could say we have a soul. We can say the soul has 5 levels. We could say we also have an animal soul. We also have an evil inclination. We could talk about primordial constriction. We could talk about a lot of things. But it could be for us a lot of words that we know the words, but we don't get the essence energy of the words because we're talking about God. In the times of the first temple, the Jews got it. It wasn't just words. It wasn't just very knowledgeable words. They got the essence of those words. They understood God. How? Were they just so much smarter than us, so much holier than us, so much more close to God than us? Because the energy of the essence of God was shining from the temple, so they perceived it. They were aware of it. They got God. And that's why we are told that we, compared to them, are like sleepwalkers, are like sleep talkers. We are saying things without really knowing what we're saying. We're observing things without really knowing what we're observing. We're hearing things without really knowing what we're hearing, just like someone in a dream. You say in dreams, you listen in dreams, things happen in dreams, but it's a dream. So that fog of a dream is sort of like the fog we all experience in terms of our understanding of God, our feelings for God, almost sometimes our relationship with God. But in the times of the first temple, they didn't have any fog. In the times of the first temple, they got it. Why? Because God's energy was shining from that Holy of Holies and penetrated the world. It was a world where you grasped God. There were no atheists. There could be idolaters. I'm saying, talking about the general world, not the Jewish world. People served idols, but they had a belief in a God. Even if it's very wrong, it still was an awareness of God. The reality of God was so strong because the essence of God is shining through the temple. So that was the first temple. Now we're in the middle of going through the details of how this affected this world. Page Ayin Dalet, facing page 146, beginning of chapter Nun Gimel, 10 lines from the top of the chapter. I'm going back 2 lines to understand the flow of the sentence. So here we have the essence of God that comes into our world, that skips the 2 whole worlds of Yitzira and Asiya. It is so holy. It is holier than any energy of God in all of the spiritual worlds. Now, how does this come into a physical reality? So in order for this to be engraved in the physical tablets, the physical stones of the tablets, so to speak, it didn't go from level to level until it got into this world. Because our world is godly energy that goes through the first world of Atzilus, and the second world of Bria, and the third world of Yitzira, and the fourth world of Atziya, and then comes into our reality, which means it's getting more and more and more minimized. So this could be a world of nature. Nature, the etymology of the word nature in Hebrew is teva, and teva is the same etymology as the word drowned. Because just like if something's drowned under the water, you don't see it. It's under the surface of the water. You see water, you don't see it. So it's like the godliness is drowned under the physical reality. It's there. It's actually the force of life, the vivification of everything in the physical reality. But we don't see it. We just see the water. We just see the physicality. So this is a world where seemingly the physical is what's real. And the spiritual is, a bit amorphous. That's why we can know the facts, but not grasp the essence. Because the physical is what strikes us, and the spiritual is remote. It's drowned under the physical. So in such a reality, that godliness could never have come through. So that's why the Rebbe says it didn't work that way. This world has to be a world of teva. It's a world of concealment because that's where we come in. That's where this world has significance. All the spiritual worlds are not physical realities, and therefore they give nothing to God. Our world is a physical reality, and therefore we give a lot to God because we can take the energy within our world and transform it and create something new that God never had before. So all that darkness means tremendous potential. But it also means that such energy couldn't possibly get in, but it did get in. So how did it get in? Because it skipped those last 2 worlds, not just levels, entire worlds of Yitzira and Asiya. So we know the tablets, the luchos, the 10 Commandments, did not go through the normative because they're the work of God. The tablets were the handiwork of God. The writing on it was the writing of God. What does this mean? It means it wasn't, again, just like the Holy of Holies takes up space and takes up no space. So the tablets also were like physical and not at all physical, right? The Holy of Holies was physical. It was a physical room. If you could go in there with your measuring tape, you could have measured the walls and you could have measured the arc but then you measure both sides of the arc and it's the same thing as the length of the wall, which makes no sense because the arc's in the middle. And these are all physical, tangible things, and they're obviously not physical at all. So similarly, the tablets, they were physical, right? Stone, sapphire, physical. There's writing in them. You could read the writing. It's physical. If you had the audacity to touch it, you would be touching something physical. But guess what? It didn't make sense at all. Why didn't it make sense at all? Well, our sages say it's engraved, carved in. But if you stood on either side of the tablets, you could read it the same way. Well, that doesn't make sense. If it's engraved, when you would go around, it would be backwards. No, however you looked at it, you could always read it. As I mentioned last week, there's letters in Hebrew that are a perfect circle, like a samach or the final mem. So if you're engraving in a physical item like a stone or sapphire, and it's a circle, the inside should fall out, which means you would just see a round empty space. But somehow that didn't work. And the inner circle, which had nothing to support it, stayed. So you could read the samach, you could read the final mem. How? Handiwork of God. And actually our sages say, yeah, it was physical, but actually it was white fire on black fire. How? It's the word of God. It's the handiwork of God. It's the writing of God. So on one hand, it's physical. On one hand, it's not physical at all. Just like the Holy of Holies is physical. Isn't physical at all. So how did this get into our world? Because it went through the higher world of Atzilus and Bria, skipped Yetzirah, skipped Asiya, and then came into our physical world as something from a different planet, as something that has nothing comparable to it in a physical world, a physical item that's so God that it sticks to the rules and breaks all the rules at the same time. Finite and infinite as one, the Holy of Holies and the tablets themselves. And that's why they were in our physical world. They changed the world. We grasped God. We got him. Not just we knew the facts. We grasped God. We were awake. We understood God. We saw God. We felt God. We said, now we don't understand, we don't see, and we don't feel. But we're amazing people, because even though we don't understand, see, or feel, we still keep trucking, and we still believe, and we still serve. And it's all pure self-sacrifice, because we don't understand, see, or feel a thing, but we still do it. So that's amazing. But in the times of the temple, because God's energy, his highest energy, higher than any of the four spiritual worlds, was in our physical Holy of Holies, they understood, they saw, they experienced, they felt, they got it. That was the world then, a godly world. So this is l'mayla me'ateva shel hazeh hagashmi, totally beyond the whole rest of the physical reality of our physical world. Hanishba me'ha'aras hashchina shebehechel kodesh kodashim da'asiyah. Because our physical world is getting energy from the Holy of Holies of the spiritual world of Asiya, the world of descent, meaning there's a world of Atzilus, being, and then Bria, creation, then Yetzirah, formation, and then Asiya, descent, and then our physical manifestation of Asiya. So our physical world, everything in our physical world, is all coming through like a conveyor belt of a lot of layers and layers of minimization and minimization. And the primary energy, as in all the four spiritual worlds, is from the Holy of Holies, of the spiritual energy of our world, of the spiritual energy of Asiya, which is very high and a tremendous minimization compared to what was in those tablets that completely skipped Asiya and Yetzirah. Totally didn't even enter those two worlds, because those two worlds would have been far too great a minimization. That from the Holy of Holies of the world of Yetzirah, from there comes the energy of our whole entire physical world. It's all being vivified by the spiritual Holy of Holies of the world of Asiya, of descent. Which means everything in our physical world is all coming from the wisdoms, the Holy of Holies, of the spiritual counterpart to our physical world, the spiritual wisdoms, Chabad, of Asiya, of the world of descent. But the Ten Commandments, the tablets, what's in the Holy of Holies, they're not coming from the Holy of Holies of Asiya, and not from Yetzirah, and not from Bria. They're coming from Atzilus. They're actually coming from higher than Atzilus. Here we say they're coming from Atzilus. They're coming from higher than Atzilus. Shehi klolos haTorah shebeseres hadibros, which is the entirety of Torah as it is in the Ten Commandments and the tablets, meaning the tablets on which were written the Ten Commandments, they contain the entire Torah, because the Ten Commandments contain the entire Torah. Reb Saadia Gaon, he showed how every one of the 613 commandments is embedded in the Ten Commandments. Actually, in Tanya, previously the Alter Rebbe explained to us, based on the Talmud, that all of the commandments, all 613, are based in the first two commandments of the Ten Commandments. It's the entirety of the Torah. God gave us the Torah. He gave us the Ten Commandments. He said in a way that we could hear the first two. He gave us himself. He gave us everything. So when we have the Ten Commandments, we've got the entirety of the Torah beyond anything any of the four spiritual worlds possess. Which is why really, even though here we're saying the Chachma of Atzilus, the highest level of the highest world, the supernal wisdom of the highest world, the world of being, it's really enrooted far higher. It's higher than any of creation. Torah supersedes creation. Torah precedes creation. Torah is the filter for creation. All of creation is an emanation from Torah. Torah is the blueprints for all of creation. Torah is the filter through which Shechina can cause creation to be. Remember, Shechina is Malchus. It's sovereignty. It's the lowest level of a world. And Torah is at least, but really much higher than the supernal wisdom, the highest level of the world. So Torah tremendously blows away sovereignty, malchus, shechina, God's speech, God's creation. All of creation is nothing to Torah. So our world is the most minimized creation there is, and Torah is higher than any spiritual creation. So imagine that, what we're putting together here. We're saying higher than any spiritual reality is in our world, which is lower than any spiritual reality. We have the highest and the lowest because this is where it counts. This is where God wants to be. This is where Mashiach will be. When we have redemption, Mashiach isn't coming to Atzilus Bria Yitzira Asiya. Mashiach is here. All that's happening is here. Only here can we give God anything. And the spiritual world is pure spirituality, it's pure godliness. God's not gaining anything there. It's godliness, it was godliness, it will be godliness. It's just a minimization, it's just a loss. Because the godliness is more constricted, there's no gain. In our world, which is even lower, where we have physicality, the greatest aberration, the greatest concealment of God, we can do something. We can change. We can serve God within this concealment and create a new energy that never existed before. Here, finally, there's a profit from creation. Here, there's something new that never existed before. So in this world, which is the lowest, we have the potential for the highest. And that's why Torah, beyond all creation, is uniquely, exclusively here. Uniquely and exclusively here. So therefore, since this Torah is so high, there was no way it could go through Yitzir and Asiya. Broadly speaking, again, in our four spiritual worlds, the first two, the higher two, are called the worlds of concealment. In Aramaic, Alma Discasia. That's Kabbalistically how we refer to them. And the next two, the lower two, Yitzir and Asiya, formation and descent, are called Alma Discalia, the worlds of revelation. Revelation meaning it's small enough to be revealed. Concealment meaning it's too great to be revealed. It's too intense to be revealed. It's too high to be revealed. So there's no way that energy of Torah, higher than anything in all of the four spiritual worlds, could traverse the worlds of revelation. That's why, for sure, it had to skip them. So it went peripherally through Atzilus and Bria, the world of being and the world of creation, because it's higher than them as well. Malchus of Atzilus and Malchus of Bria, the sovereignty of Atzilus and the sovereignty of Bria. In no way could it go into the next two worlds, and it went directly into ours. And even that was like insane for it to be able to go through Atzilus and Bria. But for sure not Yitzir and Asiya, because those are the worlds of revelation. The worlds of revelation are way too low. Now, of course, compared to Torah, Bria is also a world of revelation. Malchus of Atzilus is also a revelation, because Malchus of Atzilus, by definition, is revealing. It's causing creation to be. It's a revelation. Torah is way beyond any of this. Torah is complete. God himself, God's wisdom, God's will, God's thoughts, God. Way beyond any of this. So for it even to get through, somehow traverse Atzilus and Bria is incredible. Yitzir and Asiya, there's nothing to talk about. No way could it go through that, which is why it jumped. It skipped those two worlds to get into our world and be physical, our world, and in a physical way, totally not physical at all. As we said, the white fire and the black fire, you could read it from either side. The letters that are circles, you could read it, the circle was there, but the middle didn't fall out. Somehow suspended in air. Physical, totally not physical. Physical, totally not physical, as one. So why was it able to even go through those two worlds of Atzilus and Bria? Because only those worlds are, as I'm saying, worlds of concealment, worlds that are completely fused with the God energy. Now, in the next two worlds, it's also pure spirituality. There's nothing physical besides in our world. There's nothing evil besides in our world. But there's already a certain sense of self, a spiritual sense of self, but a sense of self that creates concealment. Let me turn that off. We were saying these two spiritual worlds, the higher two spiritual worlds, are high enough, close enough, one with God enough, that the entirety of Torah, which is what the tablets, the luchos, the Ten Commandments are, was able to go through them. Because they alone, those two spiritual worlds, are the only things that are really totally fused with God. Even though, again, even in the world of Bria, the second world, there's some we'll call it sense of self, but much more minor than the next two worlds that we call, oh, well, those are worlds of revelation. Those are really sense of self, spiritual self, but sense of self, which by definition means not completely, exclusively sense of God. שבתוכן הן הנקראות בשם שכינה אשר בכל קדשם דבייס ראשון. על דין סבסושה בעשרת הדיברוס החקוקות בלוחות שבארון בנס ומייסלקים חיים. Those worlds, within them, we have the Shechina only there in Atzilus and Bria, Machos of Atzilus and Machos of Bria. That's the level of Shechina, of God's energy that's descending to creation, that's in the Holy of Holies, in our physical world, where we have the tablets, where we have God's energy completely to such a degree that the tablets are the handiwork of God. What does that mean? I don't know. The writing of God, as we discuss the miracles that show this is a handiwork of God. This is the writing of God. So the Rebbe puts in parentheses there that even Bria is sort of Alma Disgalia. Even Malchus of Atzilus is sort of Alma Disgalia. Because there's some self, there's some creation, there's some level of revelation. Alma Disgasia, the worlds of concealment, means nothing outward bound. It's way too intense. It's way too God. And that's really what those commandments were. Absolute, complete God energy. And that's why, as we're explaining, the world was a different world. It was a world that was aware of God, that sensed God, that perceived God, that saw God, that felt God, that experienced God. Of course, the Jewish people. But even though not obviously in necessarily a holy way, but the whole world was a world of believers in God, because God was so obvious. You couldn't help yourself. There was no other option. You might be a sinner. You might be an idolater. But God you were aware of. That was all in the time of the first temple. Ubebai Sheni. And in the time of the second temple. Well, in the second temple, the tablets weren't there. The whole ark wasn't there. Amru Razal, our sages say, the divine presence wasn't resting there. So what do we mean the ark and the tablets weren't there? Well, when King Solomon and Shlomo had the temple built, he constructed underground passages because he knew it would ultimately be destroyed. And there was a certain time, a long time before it was destroyed actually, where the king said, okay, now has come the time. We have to hide the ark. We have to hide the tablets. We can't let them fall into the hands of evil. So take them through these underground tunnels, hide them. We're going to continue having a temple. We're going to continue having a Holy of Holies, but the ark and the tablets won't be there. So the temple was destroyed. 70 years later, we began the rebuilding, but we never got the ark and the tablets from that underground hidden place. So therefore, the second temple was a much lower, lesser spirituality than the first. There was still a Holy of Holies there. But says our sages say that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, wasn't there. Meaning, well, of course it was there. Of course it was there. But on a much lesser level that was experienced in the first temple, where we said, like it or not, want it or not, belief in God, the whole world had. Because God was shining through the tablets in the Holy of Holies, in the temple. Again, not necessarily that anyone saw it. Just like when the Jews ate the mun, it says that the manna in the field would dissolve, would like run into the streams, would be consumed in the water as the animals would drink the water from the rivers, which had within it that dissolved mun. And then when the nations would hunt these animals and eat this meat, they were like, oh, they're tasting the taste of mun. As it was in the animal that drank it from the water, where it dissolved. I mean, how many levels removed? And how do they identify that as the mun that the Jews had, that they were like, oh, wow, this is the mun? They sensed it. There was such a revelation of godliness, they were able to sense it. All that shut down after the first temple. There was still a high energy of God in the second temple. The second temple still had a Holy of Holies, but tremendously different, as the Rebbe is going to say. Peirus. What does it mean to say there was not a Shekhinah there? Shekhinah, the indwelling of God. God wasn't in the Holy of Holies? Yeah, there wasn't an ark, there wasn't tablets, but God wasn't there? So the Rebbe says, Madrega Shekhinah Shalish Ashar B'Vayis Rishon. Of course God was there, but not like the level of Shekhinah that was in the first temple. Because in the first temple, the energy skipped two total worlds, the world of Yetzirah and the world of Asiyah. It didn't get constricted. It was too high to get constricted.
Malchus Yetzirah, the Yetzirah, Behel Kodesh Dasiya, Kodesh Dasiya, Hayom Slavish, Kodesh Kodesh, Beis Mikdash, Shalamata, B'Shar Sabo, Ashchina, Malchus Yetzirah, and Levehes Kodesh Dasiya. I know I read a whole long chunk, but let me explain what I just read. The Rebbe is explaining to you technically what was going on in the second temple. Not like the first temple, but still not like the rest of the world. So here we have this energy of Torah, this energy higher than creation, just like in the first temple. But it's getting a lot more constricted because it has to go a lot more through the progression of spiritual worlds. So in the first temple and the second temple, we start off with sovereignty of the world of Atzilus. All of creation, sovereignty of the world of Atzilus. And then in both temples, gets invested in the Holy of Holies of Bria. In both temples, gets invested then in sovereignty of the world of Bria. And at that point, sovereignty of the world of Bria, first temple jumps into our world. In the second temple, it went into the third world of Yetzirah, Holy of Holies of Yetzirah, sovereignty of Yetzirah, then goes into the fourth world, the spiritual counterpart to our physical world, the world of Asiyah, the world of descent. And it goes into the Holy of Holies of the world of Asiyah, the intellect, the Chabad of Asiyah, the world of descent. And from there comes into our world. So if you're following very carefully, you're understanding what I'm saying, you will notice it does skip a step. The step it skips is the final step, meaning in all of these worlds, we have the Holy of Holies of the world and the sovereignty of the world, then the Holy of Holies of the world and the sovereignty of the world, then the Holy of Holies and the sovereignty, then the Holy of Holies and then the sovereignty, and then comes our physical world. Even in the second temple, though it did go through the entirety of Yetzirah and it got into Asiyah, but it only stays on the highest level of Asiyah, the Holy of Holies of Asiyah. It does not go through the final conveyor belt, filter, concealment of sovereignty, Malchus of the world of Asiyah, like everything in this world does. So, this is energy that went through the Holy of Holies and sovereignty of Atzilus, and the Holy of Holies and sovereignty of Bria, and the Holy of Holies and sovereignty of Yetzirah, and the Holy of Holies and sovereignty of Asiyah. And then became a physical cell phone. And obviously at each level, it's more constricted, more covered over, more limited, more constricted, more covered over, more limited. The tablets, not here we're talking about physical tablets, because those physical tablets are hidden, but the energy of the tablets, which is the energy of Shekhinah, which means God's divine presence on planet Earth in the Holy of Holies of the second temple, skipped the final step. It had that level of concealment less than everything else in all of creation. Because in all of physical creation, you have to go through the Holy of Holies of the world of descent of Asiyah, and sovereignty, and Malchus. And that final level, the energy of Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the Holy of Holies in the second temple, didn't go through. So it was still much, much higher than anything else in all of creation. I mean, all of our physical reality. Because all of our physical reality goes through that final constriction, compression, concealment of Malchus, of sovereignty of the world of Asiyah, the world of descent. That the Shekhinah skipped. So it was a more revealed godliness than anything else, which means even in the times of the second temple, they more understood God, saw God, felt God than anything we're experiencing. We're still the sleepwalkers and sleep talkers and sleep thinkers and sleep seers and sleep speakers and sleep feelers. We're still far less. Now, just by the way, parenthetical, fun fact, the second temple did exist 10 more years than the first. The first temple was 410 years, the second was 420. So it was 10 more years in our physical world. Also, the second temple was in size, bigger, more magnificent than the first. So on one hand, the spirituality is considerably less. On the other hand, it has actually a greater impact in this physical world
Because as we're understanding by now, our world is the world of physical. Within the physical is God's presence. So even though on the spiritual level, the spiritual was less, but in its impact on this world, on the physical level, it affected more. Sort of like the first temple was much holier, the second temple much more impacted the physical. So which is better? They're both very special in very different ways. The third temple that, God willing, we should see already today, the 11th of Nisan, a perfect day for it, will have both advantages. Even more spiritual than the first, and even more physical than the second. In one that will last forever, always, eternally. And therefore, even in the second temple, which was far less holy and intent God than the first, still only one man, the high priest, on one day, Yom Kippur, could walk in there. Even though the godliness was so much less, because the godliness was still so intense. So even though we're saying, it didn't have this, it didn't have that, it was still a greater godliness than anything this world has ever experienced since. Because of course, it was destroyed as well, right? We had the first temple 410 years. We had a 70-year exile, destruction. That's when the story of Purim took place. And then we have 420 years. And then there's an ultimate destruction of that by the Romans. And it's been 1900 plus years since. What's going on in our world? Umishecharav Beis Hamikdash. And from the destruction of that second temple, when we don't have that energy in this world either, God doesn't have a physical temple anymore. He doesn't have a holy, let alone a holy of holies. He doesn't have an ark. He doesn't have the tablets. He doesn't have the menorah. He doesn't have the altar. He doesn't have the gold altar. He doesn't have the altar in the courtyard. He doesn't have the priests scurrying around and slaughtering and offering the blood and burning the incense and the flower offerings, everything we're learning in these Torah portions. Doesn't have any of that. So where is God? Where is God's home? God's home is in Torah. It says God only has the 4 amos, the 4 cubits, 4 parallel to the 4 letters of the holiest name of God, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, 4 letters. That's the 4 amos of law, of Torah. We specifically say of law because, as I've pointed out before several times, Jewish law, in a sense, is a more overt expression of God than anything else. Jewish law is where God's will is most revealed. In the wisdom of Torah, I'm understanding the wisdom, and through the wisdom, getting to the will. In Jewish law, what's overt, what I'm directly connecting to, is God's will. I want it like this, and I don't want it like this, but not like this, and here, but not there, and now, but not later, and not before, and all the details of law. This is God's will, which is the core of God's wisdom, which is found, of course, more overtly in all the rest of Torah. So where is God? Where is his home? Where is his holy of holies? Torah, which of course is just like it always was. Meaning, in the 4 spiritual worlds, where was God found? In the Holy of Holies. Where's the Holy of Holies of Atzilus or Bria, Yetzirah, or Asiya? The Holy of Holies is the wisdom of each world. What's the wisdom of each world? The Torah of each world, as we discussed. The Torah of Atzilus, Kabbalah, the Torah of Bria, Talmud, the Torah of Yetzirah, Mishnah, the Torah of Asiya, Mikra, Tanakh, scriptures. God in every spiritual world is found in a holy of holies, the wisdom, which is the Torah of that world. In our physical world, what made this physical space, this physical ground, holy of holies? Because the luchos were there, because the tablets were there, because the entirety of Torah was there. So always, God's home is Torah. God's home is Torah in Atzilus and Bria and Yetzirah and Asiya. The holy of holies is the wisdom. Where is the Torah of those worlds? In our physical world, the Holy of Holies was Torah. Why is this place the Holy of Holies? Because it has the Ark, and in the Ark is the tablets, is the 10 Commandments, is the Torah. So everything changed and nothing changed. Everything changed, because where's his home? There's no home anymore. Where is that Holy of Holies? Nothing changed. God's Holy of Holies is Torah. God's Holy of Holies always was Torah. On all the four spiritual worlds, God's Holy of Holies is Torah. In our physical world, the Holy of Holies was the Holy of Holies because it was Torah. God's Holy of Holies, where he is found, his home, preceding all of creation, is Torah. It always was Torah, it always will be Torah. And we have the ability now to be that home for God. Meaning, in all the spiritual worlds, they don't have the entirety of the Torah, so they can never be the complete home. In our physical world, we do. And in the times of the temple, it was in a certain physical location. You had to go to Israel, you had to go to Jerusalem, you had to go to Mount Moriah, you had to get into the temple, which of course you couldn't unless you were the high priest. I mean, you could get into the temple to a certain place if you were pure Israelite, and then a little closer if you were pure Levi. Pure meaning ritually pure. And then if you were a priest, and if it was your family's turn to serve, like 2, sometimes 3 weeks a year, you could get into the temple proper. But the Holy of Holies, the high priest, 1 day a year. And we, anytime we want, we become that Holy of Holies for God. In the times of the temple, it was a physical space. And one physical person represented the entirety of the Jewish people. On 1 day of year, the holiest day of the year, went into that holiest space, and that Jew was in the Holy of Holies. And now we lost it. We don't have a temple. We lost it. We lost it. But we gained something tremendous. We're sleepwalkers and sleep talkers and sleep seers and sleep feelers, but we become God's temple. In the times of the temple, the Jews didn't become God's temple because God had a physical structure that was a temple. Now God doesn't have a physical structure. God has our brain and our hearts and our souls. So when we learn Torah, like right now, hopefully all of you or any of you that are paying attention, that are focused, because you have to understand what we're saying to be called learning Torah, your mind, your heart, your soul is God's Holy of Holies. Where is God's home now? His home is inside of us. Whenever we choose and we learn Torah, we have created for God a home. So of course it's a tremendous disadvantage. We want a temple. We can't do so many of the commandments. We don't have a temple. We're not in Israel. We're not ritually pure. That's absolutely true. We need Mashiach now. We need a temple. We need to all be in Israel. We need to be pure. We need to be serving God completely. Absolutely true. But at the same time, our unfortunate state is a tremendous spiritual advantage. Just like we're sleepwalkers and sleep talkers, and we could give to God something the Jews in the time of the temple couldn't give. Because there they saw and understood everything. So it was obvious. But yes, we understand nothing. So every time we serve, it's so precious. It's so self-sacrifice. God, we don't get a thing, and we're still sticking with you. That's so precious to God. So again, a temple is great. But now we could do something in a different way, even more precious. We can become God's temple. How? By learning Torah. In a certain way, most especially by learning Jewish law. Because when you learn Jewish law, as we said before, the sages said, where is God's home? He lost his home. The temple's destroyed. God's homeless. No, God has a home. The 4 letters of God's name are in the 4 amos, the 4 measurements of Jewish law. As we said, in Jewish law, most greatest overt revelation of God's will, which is the core of wisdom. So especially when we learn Jewish law, we are housing God. I make a point every day. I try to learn something from law. Law is the easiest thing to learn. It's so understandable. It's so simple. And it's very good. So you know what to do. But let's say you know everything. I mean, thank God. You know everything what to do. Keep learning Jewish law. 5 minutes a day. 1 law a day. Less than 5 minutes a day. Because in those minutes, you are in the strongest way God's home. He has a home, halacha, Jewish law, him expressed in your brain cells. But truly, it's all of Torah. And especially Chassidus. Says the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, said there's an expression, Ilu yadativ hayisiv. If I would know God, I would be God. Talmudic expression. The Rebbe Rashab says, when he, and again, this is a Rebbe, greatest soul of the Jewish people of that times. So it's not me talking, but he's saying, when he learns Chassidus, yadativ hayisiv. I know God, I am God. meaning Torah, Hasidus, the highest dimension of Torah, the core of Torah, in the human brain cells, that's like Mashiach revealed. Not revealed in the world, but revealed inside of you. Mashiach means God wants a home. When a Jew learns Hasidus, for the duration of time that the Jew is learning Hasidus, God has a home. The whole planet Earth is not his home, but your mind is his home. And now we understand why. Because God is found in Torah, and this is the highest level, and the deepest level, and the core level of Torah. When that's experienced in human mind, that human mind is God's temple, is God's holy of holies. So we'll stop at this point. Obviously, we're not finished the concept, but it's an incredible concept. Incredible to know how our disadvantage is our advantage. Incredible to know the privilege and opportunity we have. We have an opportunity every time we so choose. This is the 21st century. You could go on your cell phone and find Torah. You could listen to a class. You could find any book you want. It's all there, translated in many languages. So much Torah accessible. In earlier generations, to find a holy book, they had to search. To be able to learn, who had the luxury of time to study? They had to work from day to night just to put some little food on the table, some little, logs of wood to warm them, to the basic necessities of life that took up all their day. We have time. We have accessibility. We can be God's home whenever we want. So I think this is a perfect concept to learn right before we close for Pesach, because Pesach, we want freedom. Pesach is about freedom. And now we're understanding that we have this very powerful tool of Torah. We become God's home. We can really have an exodus through learning Torah. That's a powerful tool to enable us to attain the freedom we're striving for this Pesach, this Passover.